All right, we're going to pick it up right where we left off in the last video. We're going to take one of these little models here and we're going to bring it onto another layer and we're going to print it, get it ready to print in 1/4" scale here. So I've grabbed this one that's got the 4-foot diameter top, and I'm going to jump over here to another design layer that I've already set up, and I've got it cut and paste down here. But again, you can bring this straight out of your 3D model that you've made for your drafting, or you can create it on its own layer from scratch, whatever you want to do. But be aware that even though this layer scale is in 1/4", the Cura and the 3D printer is not going to see this. This is something that Vectorworks does for your convenience, or AutoCAD or any kind of CAD program. It's taking these full scale dimensions and shrinking them down on your screen or on the paper when you go to print your drafting. This circle right here has a radius of 2 feet. I drew a 4-foot diameter circle and then extruded it. So if you were to send this straight to Cura right now, it would read this as 4 foot, and it would put this model, you'd have a tiny little square for your print floor over here in this giant model, full-size model. It'd be like trying to print a table, a real table, in a tiny little Monoprice mini. You have to print hundreds of little pieces and glue them all together to create this little table. So this, don't get fooled into thinking that this has anything to do with the actual dimensions. If you click on a shape and it says it's 2-foot radius, it's going to read that in Cura as 2 foot. So what we need to do is shrink this down to our desired scale. When we take the thing off the printer and we put a ruler on that, how big will it be when you're holding it in your hand? Well, it's easy in this case because we know that this is a 4-foot diameter tabletop, and we know that, or we should remember, that 1/4", that 4 feet in 1/4" scale will end up being an inch when we go to print or draw, right? There are 4 1/4 inches in an inch. And so if a 1/4" equals a foot, then we have 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot, right? This little rectangle here is 4 foot long. And I've just dropped this in as a little cheat. And I'm going to show you a way to scale this down a little faster in Vectorworks than might be in other programs. So this little rectangle is 4 foot long, and the height doesn't matter. You just need one dimension, and it can be any dimension, but I've gone with 4 feet because it's really easy to do the math in your head, going from 4 foot down to 1 inch. The other way that you can do it, however, of course, is if you don't really need to be very precise, and you know you need a little table for your model, you can just do it in full scale, already scaled down in your head. So you might know that, okay, well, I need roughly a 4-foot diameter tabletop, so I'm going to draw a 1-inch circle and build a little model up from there. So you can use the final scale and skip this next step. But the problem with that is that that's not very precise when you get to anything that's kind of off of nice round numbers. So this is easy here. This tabletop is really easy because it's 4 feet, and we can just draw a 1-inch circle. Super easy. But what if it were 3 foot 8.5 inches or something like that, and you wanted it to be accurate in your model? Well, that's a whole lot more complicated math. So I think it's easier just type in the real world dimensions, create the full size object. Doesn't matter whether you're in full scale or in 1/4" scale. The next step is going to solve the problem of how do you get it small enough to print on the printer. Well, I'm going to hit that 0 key again and go to top plan view. And I'm just going to draw a marquee around my table. And I'm going to go up to modify and find scale objects in the modify menu. And this is a very useful command, the option to scale objects, even when we're not worrying about 3D printing. But right now we can select this and we get this little pop-up menu. And you can see it's already set up to do this operation because I've done this before with this file. So one option here, so you have really 3 options. One is just model it in inches, model it in the actual real world, what you're going to hold in your hand scale. So make the tabletop 1 inch and so on. That's probably the more complicated one. The other option is to check Symmetric here and type in that number. If you remember that number from the first tutorial, that number 0.0208. And do be aware that that's not exact because it's actually a lot more decimal places out here. So this is going to give you pretty close. And when you're doing something so small as 1/4" scale, it's not going to matter. It's going to be teeny tiny difference, but if you were to snap a dimension onto this, it may not read exactly what you expect, but it'll be really, really close, and you won't, those extra decimal places here aren't going to make any difference to your print, but just be aware of that. Or you can just forget about worrying about this number and just do this next little trick here. So there's a command in this called Symmetric by distance, and I use this all the time when I'm trying to scale things and I'm too lazy to do the math. So right now, if you click on this little button here, what it's going to have you do is going to say, all right, measure something for me that you know. So I know, for example, that this little rectangle that I added is 4 feet long. So I'm going to click once there, I'm going to click once there, and you can see in the floating data bar 4 feet, right? And I've got, and it's done, actually, this was already filled in here, but if you haven't done it already, then this will be blank until you do this step. And it says current distance, 4 feet. Yeah, that's what I measured, 4 feet. Well, what would you like the new distance to be? Well, I want it to be 1 inch. I want to take my 4 feet and shrink it down to 1 inch. So this is super easy to do. Just type in, it's already there for me because I've done this before, but type in the 1 inch, or in this case, if you were doing it in half-inch scale, you could type in 2 inches there, or whatever, and then it's going to shrink it down to the size you want. You're going to say, okay, and it's going to say, are you sure? I'm going to say, yes, please, and then it's going to make this tiny little model over here. But remember, I have it selected, so I can use the Fit to Objects button over here, or just zoom in with your scroll wheel. Either way, I'm going to jump into this object here. Now if I hit the end key to get my dimension tool and measure this, sure enough, it's gigantic here, sure enough, that rectangle now is 1 inch. So I've shrunk it down 48 times to be, this is now the right size. So I can grab this rectangle and delete it. And remember, I've got it upside down so that it will print the tabletop first, and then it will print all the stuff over here. This is all set and ready to go. I'm going to just select everything, Control A to select everything, or you can drag a marquee around it. You don't have to do that, but if you have other things, like I deleted my little rectangle, I didn't really need to do that. I could just not have it selected. And I'll show you what I mean here when I go to File and Export, and I'm going to find Export STL right there. So Stereolithography, STL, that's the file that you want to export these as. And I'm going to say OK, and then you can just say OK to this too. Just say Quality High, All Visible Objects in Current Layer. Or if we had other things that we didn't want to be included here, we could check selected objects in the current layer. That's why I grabbed it. Right now it doesn't make any difference to us because it's the only thing on the layer. Those different options, they do what they say on the tin. So I'm going to say export on this, and I'm just going to go ahead and call this a table tutorial, table tut on there. And I'm saving it to my desktop over here. And that's a good place to stop. And then the next step, we'll open up Cura and open up that file in Cura and get that ready to print.